Today being the 9th of June of 2025, a lot of events played out in the courtroom today, which will definitely blow your mind. Today's court session happened to be one of the most exciting court sessions we've ever seen in a long time. So the question here is, what really happened? Well, in this video, we shall be explaining and critically analyzing every single thing that happened in the court section today. So the court proceedings kicked off at about 10:20 a.m. The legal counsel team of the both parties were fully present. The court session started by the prosecuting lawyer making an introductory speech. So let's take a listen to what the prosecuting lawyer had to say in the courtroom today. He stated, and I quote, "Your Honor, today we are here to show that Simon illegally bought weapons. We have a witness codenamed T5 who is all the way from Nigeria. T5 will testify that Simon sent money to him to buy guns. We have bank statements and other evidence to prove this. This is a serious offense because it's illegal to buy weapons like this, and it's dangerous. Think of it like this. Simon ordered guns online, but instead of a package arriving at his door, the guns were bought by our witness in Nigeria using money Simon sent. We have the receipt to speak, showing that transaction. It's a clear case of illegal weapons purchases. We are confident that the evidence will present, including T5's testimony and financial records, will clearly demonstrate Simon's guilt. This isn't just about breaking the law, it's about public safety. We are ready to proceed when you are." So as you can see, this is statements coming from the prosecuting lawyer claiming that Simon purchased or ordered for weapons to be sent to the southeastern region of Nigeria. But instead of these weapons getting to the specific address, an individual, a close friend of Simon, intercepted these weapons. He bought them and he followed suit to do the unimaginable. So let's go back to the courtroom and see the cross-examination between the prosecuting lawyer and this individual, this witness known as T5, who claims to intercept the weapon sent by Mr. Simon. So let's see the conversation between these two parties. So the prosecuting lawyer called upon T5 to take the stance. T5 came into the stance and did all necessary rights needed to do as a witness. So the prosecuting lawyer started his questions by saying, "Good morning, T5. Thank you for being here today. Can you please state your name for the record?" T5 replied by stating his name. The prosecuting lawyer continued by saying, "T5, you have testified that you received money from the defendant, known as Simon. Can you tell us how that money was sent to you?" T5 replied by saying, "Yes, the money came through several wire transfers. I received the money in my bank account." The prosecuting lawyer continued to say, "And did Simon tell you what the money was for?" T5 replied, "Yes, he did. He told me the money was to purchase certain items." The prosecuting lawyer asked, "And what items were you instructed to purchase?" T5 replied, "He told me to buy arms, weapons." The prosecuting lawyer claimed, "Can you describe the specific weapons you were instructed to purchase?" T5 gives clear confirmation of the weapons he was asked to purchase by Mr. Simon. The prosecuting lawyer continued by saying, "Now, let's talk about how you were able to intercept these weapons. Can you explain what happened after you received the money and purchased the weapons?" T5 replied by saying, "After I received the money, I purchased the weapons." The prosecuting lawyer said, "And then what happened? What happened next?" T5 said, "And then I contacted the authorities." The prosecuting lawyer continued by saying, "And why did you contact the authorities?" T5 said, "Because I realized what was happening was wrong. I knew it was illegal and I couldn't let this happen." The prosecuting lawyer said, "So you never delivered these weapons to Simon's men?" T5 replied, "No, I contacted the authorities immediately after the purchase." The lawyer continued by saying, "So you are the reason the weapons never reached Simon's men, is that correct?" T5 said, "Yes, that is absolutely correct." The prosecuting lawyer continued by saying, "T5, can you confirm that you have provided all necessary details to the authorities regarding Simon's transactions and the weapons purchased?" T5 said, "Yes, I have provided all the details to the authorities." The prosecuting lawyer continued by saying, "T5, you have stated that you received the money through wire transfers. Can you tell the court what information was on those transfers?" T5 said, "Yes, the transfers included Simon's name and the amount of money and the date of transfer." The lawyer continued by saying, "And did you have any contact with Simon after the purchase of these weapons?" T5 said, "Yes, I had a brief communication with him." The prosecuting lawyer continued, "And what was the nature of that communication?" T5 said, "I informed him that the purchase was complete and the items were ready for delivery." The prosecuting lawyer continued and said, "And what was his response?" T5 said, "He seemed pleased." The lawyer continued by saying, "Thank you, T5. That's all for now." As you can see, this is a cross-examination between T5 and the prosecuting lawyer. But if you paid attention to this cross-examination, you notice that it doesn't make sense. You notice that there are a lot of mistakes and errors, which definitely is not adding up. And let's see if the judge will somehow, some way, pinpoint these errors. Because from the very first glance, we notice that this statement coming from T5 and his lawyer isn't adding up. It doesn't make sense. So let's go back to the courtroom and see what followed suit. Back in the court session, T5 continued when the prosecuting lawyer said, "Okay, I'm done with your cross-examination." T5 continued by saying, "I want to present documents. I want to present series of documents to the courtroom to better buttress my point that Simon really sent money to me." So T5 continued by saying, "Your Honor, members of the jury, I stand before you today not merely as a witness, but as a crucial link in unraveling a dangerous plot. I am here to present the financial records that undeniably prove that the defendant, Simon, paid me to purchase illegal weapons. These documents are not mere copies. They are the original records of the transactions, meticulously preserved to ensure the integrity of this case." T4 went on to bring out some documents, and he continued by saying, "Before you are bank statements, wire transfer confirmations, and digital payment receipts. Each document meticulously details the flow of funds from Simon's account to my own. These records clearly show a series of transactions, precisely timed and directly linked to the purchase of these weapons. The amounts match exactly the invoices I received from the arms dealer. The dates correspond perfectly to the timeline of the purchase, demonstrating a clear and direct connection between the money Simon sent and the weapons acquired." T5 also went a step further to also present all of his documents before the courtroom. He presented a series of bank statements, transactional records, and receipts. He claimed that Simon sent these monies to him. At this point, Simon wasn't looking very happy. He wasn't looking so convinced. From his facial expression, one can simply tell that Simon doesn't know T5 in any way, shape, or form, and that's what we think. So Simon asked the judge, "Permit me to speak," and Simon was granted the right. So let's go back to the courtroom and see what Simon had to say. "I, Simon, respectfully request the opportunity to cross-examine the witness known as T5. It is my right to challenge the testimony presented against me, and I believe that the thorough examination of T5's statement is essential for ensuring a fair trial. I would like to address the following points during this cross-examination." And Simon went on to list 5 key points. 5 points he needs clarity from T5. He said, the very first one here, the very first point I need more clarity on is the clarity of transactions. I intend to question T5 about the specifics of the financial transactions, including the exact amounts and dates of the wire transfers mentioned. The second point I will need clarity on is the intent and purpose. I wish to clarify the context in which the money was sent. It is crucial to understand whether T5 had any other intentions or agreements regarding the funds. And the third part is I will need clarity on the credibility of evidence. I will seek to challenge the authenticity of the documents presented by T5, including the bank statements and any other accompanying messages. And the fourth point here is I will need clarity on the communications with authorities. I want to explore T5's interactions with law enforcement and whether any pressure or influence was exerted on them to provide testimony against me. And the fifth point here is I will need clarity on the motivation for testimony. I aim to investigate T5's motivations for coming forward and whether there are any personal interests that may have influenced their testimony. I believe that addressing these points will provide clarity and context to the court regarding the allegations against me. Thank you, my Lord, for considering my request. And this, like I said, is a clear statement coming from Simon asking the judge to grant him permission to cross-examine T5, with while using 5 key points as a basis of his questioning. Yes. The following conversations between T5 and Mr. Simon will be very, very interesting. So let's go back to the courtroom and see what follows suit afterwards. At this point, the presiding judge gave Simon the full permission to cross-examine the witness known as T5. So Simon asked, "Good morning, T5. Thank you for being here today. You've testified that I sent you money for the purchase of weapons. Is that correct?" T5 said, "Yes, that's correct." Simon continued by saying, "Let's talk about those transactions. You've presented bank statements. Can you confirm that the account numbers listed on those statements belong to you?" "Yes," replied T5. "They are my accounts." Simon continued and said, "And the name listed on this account, is that your full legal name?" "Yes, it is," replied T5. Simon continued by saying, "Now, regarding the purpose of these transactions, you claim it was for your weapons. Did you and I ever discuss other business ventures?" T5 continued by saying, "Yes, we did." Simon continued, "And were those other ventures discussed through the same channels as the financial transactions?" "Yes," replied T5. Simon said, "So, the method of communication and financial transfers were not exclusively for the purpose of purchasing weapons, is that right?" T5 continued by saying, "Yes, but the context is important." Simon continued by saying, "But the method of communication and the transfers were not exclusively for weapons, correct?" T5 said, "Yes, but..." Simon interrupted him and said, "You received money and you claimed that the money was for weapons. However, you also received money for other purposes, correct?" "Yes," replied T5, "but the messages clearly indicated the purpose." Simon continued by saying, "Let's examine those messages. You've mentioned that these messages were sent with the wire transfers. Are you certain the messages explicitly stated the purpose of weapons?" T5 looked through his document to probably get a response, but Simon